On January 19th, 1809, Edgar Allan Poe is born in Boston, Massachusetts. Poe is one of America's greatest authors, and there may not be another American who lived a more unusual and tragic life, or who died under more mysterious circumstances. Poe was the second child of actors, the English-born Elizabeth Arnold Poe and David Poe Jr. from Baltimore. The family moved from Boston to Richmond, Virginia, soon after his birth. When Poe was a year old, his alcoholic father abandoned the family. 1 year later, his mother died of tuberculosis. 3 days after her death, his father died. The three children were split up. Poe's elder brother Henry went to paternal grandparents in Baltimore. His younger sister Rosalie was adopted by the Mackenzie family in Richmond. Poe himself was taken in by the family of his godfather, John Allan, a wealthy tobacco merchant in Richmond. The Allans gave the young Poe his middle name, but never formally adopted him. Poe moved to England with the Allans at age 6. 5 years later, they came back to Richmond. Poe developed a childhood crush on Jane Stannard, the mother of his friend from school. She encouraged his love of literature, but died when Poe was just 15. He then began a romance with Sarah Elmira Royster, who was just 1 year his junior, and the two were secretly engaged. Her father objected, however, ruining their plans. Poe began attending the University of Virginia in Charlottesville at age 17, where he excelled academically. But he had a falling out with John Allan over huge gambling debts and other bills Poe had racked up, and was forced to leave the school after only 8 months. In 1827, at age 18, Poe moved back to his birthplace of Boston and enlisted in the U.S. Army, and was stationed at Boston's Castle Island. He was later stationed at Fort Moultrie in South Carolina's Charleston Harbor. Poe's foster mother, Frances Allan, died 2 years after he joined the Army when he was just 20. Poe traveled to Richmond to attend the funeral, but he arrived 1 day too late and missed it. His godfather, John Allan, then helped him gain an appointment to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. But after 7 months, he was dismissed from the academy, and after another falling out with Allan, Poe was cut off completely. He published 2 books of poetry during his time in the military, and a third after his dismissal from West Point. In 1831, Poe moved to Baltimore and lived with his brother Henry and his aunt Maria Clem and her daughter, his young cousin, Virginia. Henry died of tuberculosis that same year at age 24. Over the next few years, several of his short stories were published by periodicals in Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Richmond. In 1834, when Poe was just 25, John Allan fell seriously ill. Poe tried to visit him, but Allan refused to see him and died later that year. He did not name Poe in his will. Back in Baltimore in 1836, Poe married his first cousin, Virginia Clem. He was 27, she was 13. The following year, his only novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, was published in serialized installments. The Poes moved to Philadelphia in 1838, where some of his best-known short stories were published. In 1844, the Poes moved to New York City. It is there that Poe published one of his most famous poems, The Raven, the following year. The Poes had no children. Virginia had fallen ill from, you guessed it, tuberculosis a few years earlier. She died in 1847, just 11 years after their marriage, at age 24, the same age both his mother and his brother were when they died of the same disease. A year later, he began courting the poet Sarah Helen Whitman of Providence, Rhode Island. They exchanged many letters, and Whitman agreed to marry him. But she soon broke off the engagement because of Poe's excessive drinking. In July 1848, Poe traveled to Richmond to give a lecture. Sitting on the front row was his first fiancée, the now 38-year-old Sarah Elmira Royster, who had been widowed a few years earlier. The two rekindled their romance and became engaged. Before the wedding, Poe planned a trip from Richmond to New York City with planned stops in Baltimore and Philadelphia. He arrived in Baltimore on September 28, 1849. His whereabouts for the next 5 days are still uncertain. On October 3rd, he was found semi-conscious and in, quote, great distress by a local printer, either in or near Gunner's Hall Tavern in Baltimore. His clothing, which was not his own, was disheveled. Poe was taken to the Washington College Hospital. He was incoherent and unable to explain how he came to be in this dire condition or what happened to his clothes. He apparently repeatedly called out the name Reynolds, although it is unclear to whom he was referring. 4 days later, on October 7, 1849, Edgar Allan Poe died at age 40. His death remains a mystery. The turbulence and tragedy of Poe's life are well reflected in his stories and poems. There are plaques, statues, and historic sites and markers related to Poe in Boston, in Richmond, in Charlottesville, in Philadelphia, in New York City, even in England, and of course, in Baltimore, where he is one of the city's most famous residents. In fact, in 1996, when the Cleveland Browns moved to Baltimore, they became the Ravens in honor of Edgar Allan Poe. Here are other events that happened today in history. In 1941, British forces invade Italian-occupied Eritrea in East Africa after breaking Italy's coded messages. In 1946, country music legend Dolly Parton is born the fourth of 12 children in Tennessee. In 1961, the night before JFK's inauguration, Frank Sinatra throws a gala to help pay off campaign debt. In 1983, Klaus Barbie, the Nazi Gestapo chief known as the Butcher of Lyon, is arrested in Bolivia. In 1993, production begins on Toy Story, Pixar Animation Studios' first full-length feature film. In 2002, the Tuck Rule helps Tom Brady and the Patriots defeat the Raiders in an NFL playoff game. In 2023, a man is rescued after surviving on ketchup for 24 days adrift on a boat in the Caribbean Sea. And now, it's time for our Today in History quiz. Britain acquired Hong Kong after it invaded China when China banned the trade of what? Tea, porcelain, opium, or silk? Think you know the answer? Drop your guesses in the comments below. Find out if you're right tomorrow on Today in History.